Okay, now that I took care of that little glitch. Anyway, welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio. Daishihan Miller here with Sensei Alexander there in the wings. So what are we on? Episode 266. Although one of our guys, James, one of our guys said that based on his count, ours is off. And I'm not sure how that is possible because he has like over 300 for KUDEN. I'm not sure because like I number each one of them, and I have since number one. But we'll have to double check on those things. Anyway, so a couple of episodes ago, we took a look at starting from a disadvantage, and the gist of that one, the premise of that episode, was really based on older students or folks coming back to training from time off, and life has done its thing, or people that have not started training yet but aren't sure they can do things because they're not 20 something, six-pack abs, whatever. And the gist was you just you need to you start where you are, right? Or you restart where you are. The reality is that subject to change is all things, right? That's a Mikyo paraphrased kind of lesson. We could also say that the only constant in the universe is change, right? Which I know how that sounds inside out and backwards. But it is what it is. And that plays into last week's episode about things that you just can't do anything about. But what I wanted to do was take a look at this idea of injury again. Been thinking about this, and there's so many different ways that we could come at this, but what I wanted to do was kind of take a look at one aspect of our training. People tend to like Japanese terminology. They tend to, like when it's quote unquote authentic and quote unquote traditional and all kinds of quote unquote things, right? And so there's this one aspect of training, which is actually supposed to be the goal of the training. Shinken Gata, right? Shinken Gata. Real combat. It's not live training, right? It's the real thing. The live aspect kind of thing. And well, from my experience, it's not pretty, right? It's not. It's very chaotic. It's not. It's not what most people think it is who have never been there, right? Those folks who are combat vets don't have to be told, right? Those people who are combat vets and have been in smelling range, feeling and smelling range of the assailant or the opponent or the enemy, knows that there's more to it than just physical technique or what I'm doing to his body or what he's doing to my body, right? When your attacker or your assailant is on you, and you're not just making physical contact, right? When you can feel the sweat on them, when you can smell them, it's very different, right? And so what I want to do is I want to revisit this idea of injury during this episode, but from the perspective of not just, we will start with the idea of being injured before, right? We just happen to be injured in one way or another, right? We're handicapped in one way or another before the attack comes. Okay, I mean, hell, that could be the reason the attack comes, right? Because he cut us from the herd. Okay, but right, we could become injured midway. We could become injured toward the end. We can be injured after we take the person down. Okay. And so I want to explore this just very, very overlooked, ignored, or laughed off um, aspect of real combat. And I'm going to do my best during this episode to avoid the word fighting. Okay. Because while we are fighting and there's different aspects to that, there is a general definition or way of thinking that people have that when we use the word fight, a lot of people who are in the fight realm or in the sport competition realm or in the I've been in, my fair share of fight kind of things, right? Realm. Um, what we're talking about when it comes to survival and somebody getting the jump on you. And I don't mean like they stumbled out of the bar and start pushing and shoving. I mean like you've already been stabbed or punched twice or whatever before you even realized you're in the shit, right? Um, it doesn't compute, right? But we will talk about how they handle it when it does compute. Okay. But anyway, we'll talk about that and more when we get back. So let me just go ahead and fire things up, get us officially started, and I'll see you on the other end.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
Okay, we are back. James, is it my voice or is there a sound issue? Things have been weather-wise a little different around here, and I'm not sure if I'm catching something or if it's allergies or what. But am I coming across okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Should probably turn my volume up so that I can hear you okay. All right. So we're all good. All right. Who do we have on? I see the numbers go up. I see them go down. Who's on? Who signed in?
So far, just Jared and Dave have checked in.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. So again, this either could be one of those topics where assumptions are made, or it could be one of those topics where, because of the way I described it in the promo stuff that went out, people make assumptions, right? Snap judgments about things. Or it could be one of those subjects where ego comes up with a reason to not catch it or to catch it later, or it's not important or whatever, because of a fear factor, right? Most people don't like to think about their own death. And if they do, it's very, very, very cursory, right? Most would not want to sit down and do a visualization meditation about a loved one or themselves, going through the full process, where the body goes through the full process of breaking down to the constituent elements and returning to air, ground, whatever. But violence is a good second. Right? People often talk about the worst fear. Right? People talk about their worst fear, and I think statistically, I've seen this where it was the fear of public speaking, and then, believe it or not, that's actually higher on the list than fear of death. But one of my teachers said this once, and after being around a few extra rotations around the sun, I tend to believe it more, where the biggest fear is the fear of being afraid. Right? People will do anything to not feel that feeling. So anyway, anybody else sign in, James, before I jump into this topic?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, before I jump into things, big news, right? We've been away from things. What? This is week 4, I think, from the fire that caused us to have to move the dojo. So that means that without a location, it was very difficult for me to just kind of change things and keep Whiteboard Wednesday going. But we're getting closer and closer to classes at the new location. So we have an area. I'm not sure if it's going to be always going to be the backdrop for things, but things have progressed enough that this Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, going to be back on Whiteboard Wednesday. So the theme for this week, training while injured, is, or not training while injured, operating while injured. I'm going to carry that over, and I'll tell you what it is as we're moving through the through my outline and my notes. But that'll be the topic for this week. Unfortunately, we're not ready for classes yet. But weather not being a problem, or weather notwithstanding, we're literally on the corner in the town. We're on the opposite corner from where we were before we moved to the fire-ridden location 11 years ago. We're literally a block, same side of the street, right, from that location, which is really cool. But what that also means, for anybody that is local and knows what we're looking at here, there is a park, right? This town park. It's called Cameron Park. It's this oval, for lack of it's actually a big long rectangle, but that runs between 2 cross streets, between 2nd and 3rd Street. There's just this long strip. There's a gazebo and just benches and things like that. But it's literally like diagonally across the street, the one end from the dojo. So this time of year, we have a lot of outdoor skills days and take students outside so that they can train on uneven ground and around obstacles. And it's great because, lots of trees and roots sticking up out of the ground, and going from sidewalk to grass and dirt, and the other way as well. But it's going to be a great opportunity. So what I'm looking to do on decent days, even before we get this code inspection that we need, because bureaucrats tend to move slowly, is to start up with some classes in that direction. So but again, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do like a Friday master class with the whole Zoom internet kind of thing. As soon as I can do that, man, I'm going to be right back on it. But we're easing back into things, right? So we're let's see, today, I guess. Look at my schedule or my calendar here. Fire. Let's see. So the fire was on the 2nd. So last Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? That finished up 4 weeks completely, right? So we have not had Whiteboard Wednesday for four episodes, 4 training sessions. So we'll get things back underway this week, and then again we're hoping by Wednesday we should be able to put in a call for the inspection, and then hopefully they can get somebody in there within the week. So classes should be right behind. So anyway, that's what I have on that end. All right, so let me just bring my notes up here and get things underway. All right, so again, this it's not really a part 2. This is just a different dive into things, right? Where the episode, what was that, James? 4 episodes ago, something like that. The title of the episode was Ninja Assume Disadvantage, right? Where that one was about training and doing it anyway, regardless of what your situation is, those kind of things. This one is more about the proactive side, right? Again, the Shinken Gata, the real combat, right? There's no time for pretty and all that. All right. As a matter of fact, I have a quote from Hatsumi, from Takama Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei's teacher, right? Where he said, "Real combat is not pretty, right? It is dirty and painful and filled with suffering. But the one who keeps his spirit alive wins." Right? And again, this quote immediately, right, separates real combat from what Hatsumi Sensei and some other of my teachers have called sanitized training. Right? Very often, they've referred to the dojo, right, as a sanitary space, right? Flat, even floor, big open area, high ceiling, everything's moved off to the side. People even do that when they practice, right? No obstacles, no trip hazards, minimizing all that stuff. Right? But it's probably not what the environment's going to look like, right? Now, people try to do that, right? I even remember in school, right? Junior high school, people challenging somebody else to a fight, get into a disagreement in school, but not want to get in trouble with the teachers or whatever, right? So, what do they say, right? But they probably still say the same thing in their workplace as well, right? In the parking lot, man, after school, or whatever, right? They're looking for some place where it's open, right? That they're making it as easy as possible, creating kind of a ring of sorts, right? But there's a difference, right? Environment can even our own condition and whatnot, right? And so what I'm hoping to do during this episode is to, if you're not already there, again, combat vets, right? And what I mean by that is not just somebody who's been in a lot of fights and whatnot. I mean somebody who's in a situation that they may have signed up for it as like enlisted in the military or whatever, right? Or law enforcement or EMS. And a lot of EMS people freak out because, they signed up to like help people. And then, okay, you learn how to treat gunshot wounds and knife wounds and all that. And then you get dispatched to some place where the gang violence is still going on while you're trying to patch somebody up. So, but what I'm hoping to do is, for those of you who this subject has either been academic or it's brand new, right? What I'm hoping to do is prepare you emotionally, right, for the harsh realities that we're going to take a look at during this episode, but two, at least hinting at what you're likely going to have to face. And I want to make some distinctions. There's going to be some comparisons, and those comparisons are probably going to piss a couple of people off and make them uncomfortable and whatnot. But if you can't put up with me making you uncomfortable, somebody trying to shove a shiv in your gut or punch you in the throat or take you out of your family's world or whatever, right? I'm pretty sure that's a little bit more uncomfortable, but hey, just the way I look at things. Okay. So let's start off with this, right? Again, this is very much like that previous episode where I'm going to say that most people think that they're going to be at their best when violence happens, right? When that attack comes. But I'm sorry to say that's a fantasy, okay? We can do all the preparation in the world. We can do everything that we can think of, right? Even cops and whatnot, right? In that moment when things are happening and the adrenals kick in and whatnot, things change, right? the question is, and this is like again under best conditions, right? And things still happen, right? But what if it happens when you're already hurt, you're already sick, you're already tired, you're unprepared? Okay. One of the things that used to irritate the shit out of me when I was doing bodyguard work, and this is very, very common in the personal protection world, where maybe your assignment isn't to the principal who is writing the check, but his wife or kid or whatever, right? But it's happened more often than not, and I didn't stay on those details for very long. Sometimes of my own accord, and sometimes because I was asked to not come back. But it's one person, me, and the person I'm protecting, right? And they want to go shopping, and then they decide that the guy who's there to protect them has extra arms, and he should carry the bags from their shopping extravaganza, which means you can barely see. You got all this shit hanging off of you. You can't get to a weapon if you need to. So a lot of guys just fold because the paycheck's more important than than standing their ground. But things can really go sideways, right? So, but we talked about these other factors in other episodes, right? Age and pre-existing injuries and things like that, right? But again, the injury might not be what most people would think of as an injury, right? Like your arm's in a sling because you broke your arm, in training a week before, 2 weeks before, and now you got to do things. But it might be, right? It might be arthritis. It might be, who knows, right? But the myth, right? This fantasy, right? It kind of made up of 3 big areas, right? The 3 biggest myths that are either spoken or unspoken. It doesn't really matter, right? And they are that you will be fresh, right? Not tired, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? 2, that you'll see it coming, which means that your awareness will have been on your surroundings and not thinking about what honey wanted you to bring home, after work or class, or you weren't pondering some conversation or some issue or problem that you're trying to deal with, right? And the third one is that you'll get to fight on your terms. Right? It's not the way it works. Okay. Bad guys are really good at this. They're really good at setting things up. And again, this is the difference between that fight. I'll talk about more of this in a bit here, but that fight mentality, right? 2 bulls going at it, trying to settle their differences or, prove who's better or whatever. And having to deal with something that you neither wanted to happen, volunteered to be a part of, right? Or are trying to win in the conventional sense that most people think of when they think of fighting, right? So, this, and again, I've mentioned this over the past 4 weeks, but, when I say that I wasn't physically in Kamai, right, when the fire hit, right, while we were starting a KUDEN episode, coincidentally, right, and then, had to get on scene and whatnot, right? James and I and the other student that we had with us certainly weren't like moving around in Jumonji or Doko or whatever, right? But mentally and emotionally, we were, right? We were in an observational stance, right? And the planning and the strategy and tactical to-do list was being formed at that moment, right? And that made and still makes all the difference in how quickly we're getting things done to get the dojo back up and running, right? Contrast with coincidentally, ironically, pick a word. A friend of my, I'm gonna use this term loosely. A friend of my wife's, right? Um, it's actually an ex from like 20 years ago, right? Now she's been helping this guy's brother uh, out of a really bad situation. His wife, I mean, they were very, very close. They were together for 26 years and stuff like that. She died 2 years ago. Just bad illness, and but again, really, really close. And he needs some help, right? And so she's been trying to like be there and help him as a friend and whatnot. Well, this ex is this guy's brother. So anyway, so she's bumped into him occasionally here or there. And anyway, coincidentally, um, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, something like that. Okay. She gets this call. His place is on fire. He's rooming with another brother and that brother's wife. Anyway, so he gets displaced, right? And so I don't know what the funk was. I mean, I have hints and whatever, right? Not good family dynamics. Most of it his fault. But, you know, uh, I and my wife gave him a place to get a shower, get himself freshened up and whatnot. And we put him up in our guest room until this morning. I gave him some time to, find a place, that kind of thing. And I understand trauma. And I understand that some people are going to say throughout this episode, as I make certain comments, just like they're going to say throughout a whole bunch of other episodes, everybody handles trauma, stress, whatever, differently. I agree. Right? But warriors are consistent in the way they handle things. So, in all honesty, I am tired of hearing the blanket everybody handles things differently comments when I'm talking about these different subjects, because I'm not talking about fucking everybody. I'm not. I'm talking about warriors. That's the theme. If anybody wants to be like everybody else and they want the same cop outs, they want the same escape routes, they want the same everybody has to understand, they want that kind of mentality, then warriorship's going to remain a fantasy. Or maybe they should just hang that up and do underwater basket weaving next week. Pick something. Okay. But what I have heard for the last 2.5, 3 days, right, is just nothing but depression, whatever. Even though, like, my wife has been in influential positions. This guy works in the healthcare system, works for the hospital that my wife is back at, and she knows about all these things, right, where he can get assistance and aid and all that kind of stuff. And the guy's literally like without a place, right? So, you can talk to this person and there's this thing in place, this thing, and you might have to fill out a form, whatever. You might have to ask to see if there's something in the fund for this kind of thing. There's an emergency fund where you get up to $1,500, whatever, right? And then the last straw for me was I think it was this morning, right? How you doing? Well, as good as I can be. Okay, fair enough. That was my words, right? But my brain immediately starts working on where did that come from? Okay. Because while the inflection sounds normal, it's what a lot of people use. It's one of these colloquial statements, right? And we've had conversations about these things in the past as well. But where did that come from? And what I mean by that is, did it come from a place of, like last week's subject, right? Shikata Ganai, right? Uh, there's nothing you can do about it. Okay. You're right. Okay. Your house caught fire. There's nothing you can do about the fire. But what's your priority? Find a place to live, restabilize, those kind of things, right? Get some equilibrium, right? That puff of smoke, endurance kind of thing. So did it come from, and here's the answer, right? That he gave, right? The best that I can do. Okay. So is this the best that you can do? Because, right, you're sitting around, not making any phone calls, right? My wife's lining up all this shit for you. And even when you're told you can do this, call this person, whatever. I made a phone call to a friend who they and their partner have a whole bunch of rentals and whatnot. But I already gave you their number. My wife's just super proactive, right? Or you just sitting around waiting for other people to do it, right? Because you can't, right? This is the best that I can do, right? Or is this the best that, like, that I can do because I'm not capable of doing anything else? One is external, right? There's nothing I can do. That night when I, stopped KUDEN 5 minutes in, right, and ran off, okay? Can't do anything about the place being on fire. I can't go back in time, right? Throat punch somebody that was about to do something stupid to cause an explosion, okay? I can't. That's external. I can't do anything about that. But what can I do? Well, I can go on scene, assess, right, and start building a plan. Anyway, so, but it's very, very different, right? The Kamai, right, and we're going to talk about this again because there's other things. There are fashionable statements. There are quotes, Hatsumi Sensei's quotes and things like that, that they're not misinterpreted. I mean, sometimes they are, but they're not misinterpreted. They're underinterpreted. And we're going to take a look at those as well. Okay. So, but again, it's well, I think it's still recorded unless we just deleted that one. But, my response, James's response, my response when our student told us that, the building the dojo's in is on fire. I'm sure it was quite classic, right? I mean, I just shouted "what" a couple of times, right? It was, so I didn't see it coming. Certainly wasn't fresh when it came to, like, that's not what I was prepped for, nothing like that, right? And the fight being on my terms, I didn't start it, right? I wasn't close enough. I mean, we had fire extinguishers all over the place, right? For our area, should something happen. But the difference is in the mentality, the emotional control, those kind of things, right? So anyway, one more repeat, I guess, of Takuma Sensei's little quote, right? Because this is what's going to stick with us. And I have other ones. I have I think one or two from Hatsumi Sensei. I have one I think from Tanamura Sensei from the Genbukan, and I have one from Manaka Sensei from the Jininkan. Right. So pick your flavor, pick your poison. Okay. But again, there's I see it when people practice. I used to do it, right? And there's a time for this because we're practicing for not really perfection, but proficiency, right? Extreme proficiency. But and I'm going to pull a lot from Shidoshi Malmstrom, right? One of the most reality-based and focused teachers that I have had in this, not just in this art, anything I've ever trained in. Okay? And not like, constantly hounding on you, like, oh, you better be serious because, this is deadly. And no, right? Just very, very clear about things. And that clarity translated into training drills and things like that to make sure that we got the experience, right? But again, he used to always say, right, the dojo is not the fight environment. Right? At a certain point, you're going to have to stop training like you're going to be in the safety and the sanitary area called a dojo. The kata is not the fight. Your partner is not the attacker. Okay? I know we use these terms, but that's not the way it works. Right? If it was the way it worked, and if folks only needed to learn the techniques and then they'd be prepared for any kind of attack in life, we wouldn't have the sheer number of martial artists and ninja practitioners, Bujinkan people or whatever, absolutely floored by a life event, right? Financially, relationship wise, whatever. Okay? This doesn't mean to be emotionally detached and cold. It means to be very, very clear about things that could happen so that we prepare ourselves. And not just technique wise. Right? I did a video. I don't know how many people on Facebook saw the video walkthrough I did a couple of days, I don't know, 8 or 9 days after the fire, where I'm walking through and like the carpet's gone. I mean, it's freaking still dripping and stuff in there, right? Because the place was open to the rain and all that, right? It was just, skeletal kind of thing. Actually, a day or two after I shot that video, they pulled down all the framing from the drop ceiling. They pulled down all the ductwork that was still up that everybody saw. All that stuff had to come down, right? But anyway, so the gist here is, again, real combat is not pretty. Okay. Just like relationships, right? They're great when everything is great. Not so great when they're not so great. And they can be pretty fucking volatile when they fall apart. There's property involved or kids involved or somebody, one of them at least, if not both people, have to look like the good guy, have to be seen in the best light, have to be seen as the victim, have to be seen as whatever. I mean, shit gets nasty fast. Okay. And combat's combat, right? It's not pretty, right? And as Takamatsu Sensei said, it is dirty and painful and filled with suffering. And not just in the moment. That suffering lasts, right? In forms like PTSD and all kinds of shit, right? But the one who keeps his spirit alive wins. Right? So, James, anybody else sign in or comment? Any questions, comments, or anything up to this point?
Jimmy said "Konbanwa," and Maui, Chris McLaurin checked in.
Awesome. So Chris did not pass out after he left the dojo from helping, at an all-time low.
He was late, but he's here.
He had an all-time low of 55 on his glucose meter, which beat the other time when he was working and left at 67. And when it hit 69, I told him he should be leaving. And in true Chris McLaurin fashion, see, I just made him infamous. He wants to be famous. I just made him infamous. He said, "I'll be all right."
I'm good, sir. I'm good.
Yeah, see? The Chris McMantra. Sensei McMantra. That's what I'm going to use. Anyway, I can hear him chuckling right now because he knows. He knows. I'd say he had a sheepish grin, but anyway, he's too tough for that. So I appreciate people like sucking it up and moving through. But actually, this is a perfect time for this as well, because Chris has been battling this stuff for a while, and it's quite possible that his phone or watch or whatever he has, where that freaking alarm goes off because his sugar dropped, and he could actually have to defend himself during one of those moments. And with every move, his sugar stores will be depleted. And at a certain point, he will black out. And then what does the bad guy do after that? Right? So there's a lot of these lessons. When we start talking about, the ninja assumes disadvantage, and we start talking about injury before, during, even after an attack and whatnot, a lot of these things, a lot of these other lessons become much clearer and much easier to understand. Right? We still may not want to understand them, right? Like not duking it out like we're going to be in a 2-minute or 5-minute round or whatever, right? Just landing shots to land shots, right? Instead of staying within the 10 seconds or less, 4 moves or less kind of paradigm, right? It's not the same. Okay. So anyway, anybody else? Now that I made fun of Chris. That's all right. I'm sure he talks about me in his sleep or when I'm not around.
Dave just said not having classes make it hard for me to keep track of what day it is.
I had 1 or 2 of those moments myself along the way. I did. As a matter of fact, James, last Wednesday, you and I were at the dojo working on things and whatnot. And I got home and realized, shit, it's 2 hours past when we were supposed to have our business team meeting. That was on Wednesday, right? And it was luckily no one was going to be around other than I wasn't sure if Terrence was going to be on. And so Terrence, I think he had to work that night. So we were able to reschedule or to schedule a one-on-one because he's handling all the social media stuff at this point. But I got home and I'm like, holy shit, completely like we were just working our asses off,
Right.
Talking and planning and all kinds of stuff and just getting stuff done. And completely forgot that it was Wednesday. Even after I sent out an email, but I had one of those moments. So I get it, Dave. I want to get back on track. I'm going to be so happy, right? With Whiteboard Wednesday, that gives me 2 anchor days now, Monday and Wednesday. And let me get these other things back on. I'll know what friggin' day it is. So anyway, I'd like to, I know I would blame it on Alzheimer's or whatever, but I don't know. There is an upside to that. I remind people all the time. Best thing about it, you meet new and interesting people every day. Don't even have to leave the house, right? So stay positive, my friends. Right? Most interesting ninja in the world. No, I don't want to be that guy. I've met quote unquote interesting people, way more colorful than I. So cool. All right. Well, let me just jump back into my notes here, and we'll just keep on moving. So, okay. So let's do this. I want to take a look at a couple of other belief systems, fantasy, whatever. I start talking about that, the dojo fantasy logic, that kind of thing, right? Or what we affectionately call, and I didn't make this up. This went all the way back. Shidoshi Malmstrom, Shoshi Hayes. We had this term for misguided beliefs in the dojo, right? Or picking up certain habits or certain beliefs or certain training methods that would sneak in because, well, they worked in a dojo. And we confuse that with the real world. And I say we, I'll include myself in there for the different things, not always the same, because I came to the martial arts honestly, and I don't mean honestly because I like them. I mean honestly because I had a very violent childhood, inside the house and outside. But the term that we used was dojo syndrome. And what that is, we named it this as this like disease or affliction that someone catches either because of the association with the group and it's already going on, or because nobody inoculated them. Nobody gave them the shot to make sure that didn't happen. And luckily, I've had teachers, especially within this art, that the inoculations, the shots, the boosters were plentiful. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of these things. Right, let's explore some delusions. Right, so let's start with sport fighters. Right, we'll just piss people off right off the bat. Okay, so here's something that I don't know that people think about. Okay, when it comes to training that way, right? To be, there's nothing wrong with training to be strong and fast and agile and all that kind of stuff, right? But what is one given for sport fighters? They know when the fight is scheduled. These things are all planned out, okay? Months, at least in advance, right? So they get months to prep for this fight. They get to work out. They get to, watch their diet. They get to, make sure they're just in peak form. Watch, videos of other fights of, the upcoming opponent and whatnot, workout strategies, all that kind of stuff, right? But what happens if they get injured before fight time? Fight gets rescheduled. Okay. Now let's contrast that with the real world. One, violence doesn't give you a calendar invite. And if it does, and you show up, well, then you deserve what you get, right? In the real world, right, violence comes when you're limping, when your back is out, when you're sick with the flu, right? Or after you've been up all night helping somebody else through some kind of emotional crisis, or your kid was ill all night long. There were nights in my earlier days where I was up all night long or all day with a sick kid or a sick wife or whatever, right? Or, relationship strain or whatever, right? And then having to go back on duty, right? As a military cop for a 12-hour shift, which usually was 14 to 16 hours because of inspections and what we call them guard mounts and briefings and debriefings and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but just little to no sleep and still having to go out there and deal with people that, who knows, could have rolled out of bed that morning thinking about what bad shit they were going to do. Okay. And that's just the reality of things, right? And to think and train like that, like that's the reality. A lot of people, a lot of students, a lot of teachers train and practice as though they've got all the time in the world before the bad guy is going to show up. I mean, just admit that it's a hobby. Call it a day. Do what you want, right? But if we're focused on real world stuff, right? My first duty station out of basic training in the military was in South Korea. I don't know how many people actually know this or not, but the Korean War never ended. Okay. I know there are dates in history books and things like that, right? But there was never a peace treaty signed. There was something, the thing that was signed is something called an armistice. An armistice is an agreement to stop shooting at each other. That's not the same as a peace treaty. Right? So technically, the Korean War is still so. So I get shipped over, and I get assigned to 2nd Infantry Division, which is right up against the demilitarized zone, the DMZ. It's this huge section, right? And 2nd MP Company, right? Now, luckily, I was in a detached platoon, farthest away from everybody else, almost butted up against 8th Army, which is 2nd Infantry Division's backup, right? But they're supposed to hold the line when stuff's happening, okay? And the best time for North Korea to attack is the dead of winter because of the layout, right? The river that separates North Korea and South Korea in the wintertime freezes solid. And when I say solid, I mean you can drive full on heavy armored tanks and you know, guns and things like that across these things, right? Rest of the time, you've got this navigation problem, right? But they can just come straight across. And to give you, for instance, for the second, now it got warmer as you go down the peninsula, right? As you go down through South Korea. By the time you hit Jeju-do or Jeju Island, which is off the southern tip, it's all tropical, right? But where I was, wintertime, we were wearing Arctic gear. Okay. Like full on Arctic stuff. Okay. Arctic mittens, right? That have a trigger finger kind of thing that you can, face masks because the face will frostbite like that, become frostbitten that fast. Okay. So worst of fucking conditions, right? If anything would have ever happened. Okay. So, we were constantly being reminded, okay, the balloon could go up, which was our catchphrase for shit going sideways, could go up at any time. You must be prepared. Your shit has to be ready and ready to go at a moment's notice. Okay. All the time. Contrast that with being back in the States, not being in Europe where something could have happened during the Cold War, or being in South Korea where it's like right there. You're holding the line, literally, right? I mean, even if, like when Grenada happened, right? They planned and got units ready and stuff before they did the initial assault. And we had, when it was time for me to go, we had 3-4 days, right? And getting ready and all that kind of stuff. We were scheduled to go to the clinic and get like our battery of tropical inoculations, our shots and stuff like that for malaria and all kinds of things, right? It wasn't like they just threw you in, right? Where I was in South Korea, right out of basic training, if that alarm went off, things were coming, right? You were either ready or not, right? And so, huge difference. Okay. Anyway, let's switch to kind of a second fighter type, right? So this is the street fighters, the tough guys, whatever, right? The bump shoulders. Next thing you know, there's pushing and shoving and gnashing of teeth and whatever. Again, we're still thinking fighter, right? So this isn't so much where they know the fight, the date of the fight or whatever, but these guys tend to walk around with a chip on their shoulder, and they're willing to fight at the drop of a hat, right, or the drop of a dime. I've been told by certain people that over the years that have wanted to train with me, that they just can't help themselves. Right? Somebody calls my mom a name, they call my sister a name, whatever they do X, Y, Z. Right? I can't not. Right? But see, here's something interesting. Okay, because I often ask, right? When was the last time somebody just pulled a knife on you, or they car came up, right, slammed on the brakes and stuff, and they hit you with it, knocked you on the ground and stuff like that, and jumped out of the car, and here they were coming, right? Oh, there's an interesting scenario, right? Or had already hit you with a tire iron or a baseball bat or whatever, and you weren't down and out, but you were right, not what you were 30 seconds ago, right? But here's the thing with that group, right? They mellow out with age. They mellow out with injury, illness, right? Because they know they don't have it in them anymore. There's one guy I'm thinking of at the moment that had that I can't help myself kind of thing, and he's chimed in on some of our discussions online and whatnot, and he goes, I just I negotiate more now, and I don't put myself in those situations and things because I know that I'm not as fast and I'm older or I'm injured or whatever. Okay, yeah, good. I'm glad it finally sunk in. But random attacks, the kind of things that we're talking about, they don't disappear just because you've quote unquote grown out of it. Right? As a matter of fact, some of the attackers that I'm thinking of will cut you from the herd because you're heavy or you're old or they overheard you talking about having arthritis and being up and down on ladders for the last week has now affected your back and whatnot, and you need to kind of reset. No, that's you're now in prime target category, right? So while fighting may be a phase that some people go through in their life, right? Self-defense is not a phase. Right? It's not a choice. Right? It's a necessity. I believe it's a responsibility, but we're not talking about fighting. Okay. And we contrast that to the reality of today. I don't know how many people's been watching the news. Gunmen, snipers, just freaking demonstrations going sideways and whatnot, right? Firefighters, EMTs, teachers, right? We're seeing real violence in so-called safe places. Headlines show it almost daily, right? And the reality is that violence, the type of violence we're talking about, right, is random. We never know when it's going to happen, what it's going to look like, how many aggressors, the environment, nothing like that, right? It's often senseless, right? If you've never been in one of these things, then you will not have experienced, which is something you have to get over mentally, right? Because it doesn't matter in that moment. This is part of Zanshin. Working through the brain racing to figure out not only what is happening, but why it's happening. Because to a rational human being, a lot of this violence is often senseless, right? Like you don't have a better way to work out your problems. Okay. And what we're talking about, this doesn't rarely, if ever, does this wait for you to be ready. Okay. It's not the same. Okay. Now I'm paraphrasing this across years of listening to Hatsumi Sensei teach, but in a nutshell, what he's been teaching for years is you will be injured. That is part of real combat. You train to be able to continue after that, after you've been injured. Okay? The question is, when did you get injured? Were you injured and that's why they chose you because you were an easier target? Did you get injured before the attack actually started? Now, technically, the attack started because you got nailed, and now, like, they got you done jump on you, and now you have to work from that perspective to not get further beaten, maimed, killed, whatever. Right? And we have to recognize this, because Hatsumi Sensei he wasn't just teaching for the sake of teaching, right? This topic kept coming up and coming up and coming up because this perspective, or this mentality, I guess, right, is about normalizing, right, the presence of injury, and it supports the philosophy of resilience, right, over just mere avoidance. Of course, if we can avoid something, we're going to avoid it. But Shikata ga nai. Right? Last episode. Right? It is what it is. Right? Some things can't be avoided. Not because we choose to not avoid it. I'm talking about like we've already been clocked. Right? So this little lesson, again, it's paraphrased across a bunch of different lessons, but this lesson from Hatsumi right? This sets the mental stage for working through pain and having to adapt on the fly. Because I often talk about, and especially in that one episode I was talking about with assuming, what the hell was the title? Assuming disadvantage, right? That you have what you have. So, and no matter what, right? Any good attacker, right, positions themselves for the advantage. So you're always going to start out at a disadvantage. But what I'm talking about during this episode, right? What I'm talking about today is you become injured through the foray. And so you lose shit as you move forward. And you still have to win. You still have to survive. Okay. So these three truths, okay, should lead everybody, me, you, everybody that's serious about this subject, should lead the student to one realization: preparation isn't optional. Preparation in areas like this, disadvantage, working through, um, losing a limb, and I don't mean that it got hacked off or anything like that, but losing the use of a limb or a body part, or even not being able to move. Right? Taijutsu is effective body movement. Yeah, well, you take a shot in the wrong place, you're going to be fighting from a ground holding position because you're not going to be able to move. Okay? So the preparation in these areas, not optional. It is the only path. All right. All right. James, what do we have to this point before I move into like a mental reset?
Nothing else yet.
Okay, cool. All right. So, well, you know what? Let me ask a different question. Has this been valuable so far? And if so, in what way? Or am I just singing to the choir and everybody already knows this, but they're hanging out because they're avoiding family, or they have nothing else to do, or they're engaged in theft of time at work? And anybody new join in or sign in? Not necessarily new, but you know what I mean.
No, nobody else has checked in yet.
Well, fine. I don't want to talk to them anyway. All right. Well, let me jump back to things here. Actually, you know what? Going back to this injury kind of thing, there is a common response that women have, and I'm singing to the choir in this direction because you wouldn't be on this if you weren't serious about self-defense and protecting yourself and your loved ones, right? And if you think you're serious but you're not actively training, then think again. But one of the most common statements made by women when approached with the question, have you ever thought about, taking martial arts or taking self-defense classes or whatever? One of the most common responses is, that's my husband or that's my boyfriend's job. Okay. Which is really funny because right after that, I normally add in, so they're trained, they can handle themselves. And then the woman will either roll their eyes, laugh, or, make some kind of noise, right? Which completely negates that. And then depending on my feeling in the moment, right, I may just kind of give them a quizzical look, or I might actually just be confrontational and say, did you just tell me that it's their job to protect you, but they couldn't protect themselves? That's your logic? Oh, I wish you well. Have a nice day. and I send them on their way, because I don't let presuppositions. It's like leaving a festering wound kind of thing, right? So I don't let those things hang out. My job, my Mikio teacher told me this a long time ago, that it was his job and therefore got passed on to me. If I'm truly supposed to be passing this stuff on authentically and whatever, whether it's on the life mastery side or it's on the combat side, my job is to wake people up. Whatever is going to do that, right? And that means that they're going to not like me as they walk away, and they're going to remember me through a negative experience for the rest of that's okay. Okay. My job is to wake them up. My job is to make sure that whether or not they like what I said, they will never forget that I said it. And if I can leave it as a festering wound, all the better, because we are loaded with festering things that just going to take the right situation, the right conditions for those things to manifest again, and then bring shit back into our lives, right? But there's certain things that should be festering wounds because they lead us to enlightenment. They lead us to uh, a condition where we have to fix it, right? Because we want it to go away that badly. So I'm okay with that, right? Anyway, all right. So the point here was in a long time ago, we used to do demonstrations on a regular basis, as a lot of martial arts schools do. As a matter of fact, in the park that we're now located by, because and I don't know why things died off, but every summer, every couple of weeks, there was a festival or a fair or something like that right there in that park. And so we were either helping to raise money for the local fire departments, because in our state, and at least in our area, they're all volunteers. So do that, or there was always some kind of a cause that we could highlight the school. We could do demos and things like that. But we'd also set up a game booth. We had a ninja star throw kind of thing. And so we raised money, and then whatever money we made from that, we donated to the cause, right? So anyway, one of the skits that we put into our demos, because we would never just do, here's the technique, right? We would set it up pretty much the way Hatsumi Sensei sets things up when he would do demos. They were done as skits. And what we wanted to do was negate or wake up the women and the guys too, right? And so what we would have is a guy and a girl walking, like they're going through the fair, and bad guy would come up behind with a club and clock the guy in the back of the head and lay him out on the street. He's out cold, and then go after the girl. Or there'd be two guys. One would knock him out, and then they'd both move in, and she would do these defensive techniques and put them down, and then she'd go over and kick him or wake him up or whatever and say, let's go, come on, I want some funnel cake, or whatever, right? End it with a laugh. But what we wanted to do was just throw this dumbass belief system right out there. And so we did. At other times, I had a 22 automatic, a little Spitfire, Jetfire kind of thing, right? And I had blanks. And so we would start the demo off with a gun attack, a mugging, and the person with the gun, up against the back and that kind of thing. And so people are still milling around. People are just, there, it's another martial arts demo or whatever, right? And so we're doing our little thing, and as soon as we turn to do the evasion, right? As soon as bad guy pulls the trigger, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to startle him with your fucking move, and the gun's going to go off. So if you haven't trained to deal with a big loud bang that happens when you start your move, or if your taijutsu sucks and you get shot through a kidney, right, and other juicy gelatinous stuff on the way out, right, well then That defense was short-lived. But that bang, okay? So we do our technique, and because of the bang, it would startle everybody awake, and they would instantly all eyes on us. Okay. But they missed because what you'd hear afterwards, because we do the whole technique and take the person down, by the time they got their wits back about them, we already had them on the ground and locked up and disarming with the weapon. And what you'd hear from 70% of the crowd was, what the hell just happened? What do you do? Wait, do that again. Nope. Okay. That was the point. Okay. So this is what it means to not be fresh. This is what it means to not be in the moment when the attack starts. Yeah, I know we were the ones doing the move, and we were the ones with the gun up against our back and whatnot. But you were in the middle of a sidebar conversation. You were in the middle. Okay. So I've been talking about this being injured kind of thing, and I led off like I said I would, right, with being injured before the attack. Now, this is something I'm going to expand on during Whiteboard Wednesday this week. Okay, this kind of a 3 injury scenarios kind of thing, and I haven't come up with a title or anything like that, but that this is going to be the focus. Okay, so that's what we'll take a look at. These 3 scenarios where injury could occur. Okay, so we're talking about before the attack. So either we brought it or he created it at the very beginning, right? So in this case, we're starting at a disadvantage. Okay. The second scenario is that we're injured during the attack. Okay. And now we have to keep fighting. We have to keep defending while compromised with less body parts in the fray. We'll talk about how we used to practice this in a minute. And then the other one is after the fight. Okay. And that could show up in a couple of different ways, right? It could be a new threat. It could be that we are now fighting a life-threatening condition, like a bleed-out condition, okay, where we got cut or stabbed or whatever during the attack. That's when that injury occurred, and we took the person down and whatnot. And now we have to not bleed out and die. Okay, or same attacker. We're still fine, but as we take them down, right, we haven't really gotten good at disarms, or we haven't gotten really good at restraints, or we have played around with restraints, but we never really learned that lesson of restraining somebody in a position so that they can't go for a weapon that they've had hidden the whole time. And so we take them down and they draw a weapon and shoot us from there, or slash our leg or whatever. Right. And now we have to deal with that. Okay. Each of these scenarios demands a different mental and physical awareness, or I'm sorry, readiness, right? Readiness. Right? Zanshin takes care of the awareness, but each one requires a different type of training drill, a different type of different type of preparation. Okay, so one of the things that Shidoshi Malmstrom was really, really good at, right, was creating these drills where we could simulate and rehearse injury, different types of injury, to build strategy and adaptability. Okay, because ultimately, if something gets tagged, you train with what you have left. Okay? I remember when I tested for my Shodan. I didn't know I was going to be testing for my Shodan. I went up to test for first Q, and so did one of the other two, there were three of us that ended up testing. Only one person knew that they were testing for Shodan. I and one of my friends, David, were testing for first Q. And at some point I realized this is not a first Q test. This is something different, right? And so one of the things that I have left, I have kept in our Shodan test that both Shidoshi Malmstrom and Shidoshi Hayes used during Shodan test was a blade avoidance test, and it was all about Tai and Jutsu. It was all about not getting cut, not getting stabbed, that kind of thing. You were unarmed. It was Muto Dori. And there was actually something more to the test than just evasion. Okay? But the whole idea was, for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or until he got tired, not the attacker, right? The teacher. They'd come at you with these things and you had to, and if you could do some kind of counter or whatever. But the primary point was to show your taijutsu, to show that, look, if you can't cut me, if you can't stab me or whatever, if you can't touch me, you can't hurt me. If you can't hurt me, you can't beat me. Okay? And so that was the primary skill for Shodan. It still is in my curriculum, still is. And I didn't hear it happen because, I was in my zone. We were all assigned a black belt who was coming at us, so it was all happening at the same time. And so I had no idea what was happening with the other two. I just was just focused on me. And my friend David put in a really good demonstration for his test. Really, really good. But wasn't promoted to Shodan because there was a deal breaker in the entire test. Manaka Sensei has these things wired into his, right, in the Jinkan. Every good teacher I've been around has non-negotiable deal breakers, no matter how good your fucking techniques are, period. Okay? And for this test, for this aspect of the test, if you gave up, if you surrendered, you failed the entire test. And David got touched by the knife. His whole body relaxed. He looked at our teacher and said, "Oh, I'm dead." And later, he said it again, kind of justify, well, the knife cut me across my gut. And Sensei said, "Yeah, I didn't see that. I think it caught your belt buckle." Of course, we weren't wearing pants with belt buckles and things like that, but just because the knife touches you doesn't mean that it cut deeply enough to kill you or kill you in that moment. But mentally, he gave up. And so we were not given rank because 99.9% of the test went well. Okay? There are certain things that are non-negotiable in this art and should be. I know they haven't been in certain circles. Not my fault. Okay? But we had things like this, right? And so one of these drills, one of the most important drills, we haven't done this in quite a while in the dojo, but hint, nudge, nudge, for those of you in Shinobi Kai, black belt levels and stuff, guess what's coming, right? One of the most important ones that I ever learned from Shidoshi Malmstrom was based on a hard truth, okay? And that hard truth is that in a real attack, you might not have all your tools available. When I say tools, I mean limbs, okay? I mean body parts. I mean muscles that are connected the way they're supposed to be connected, those kind of things, right? And so in this particular context, right, we train for two things, right? One, we train like a drill, right? So we're doing certain things. And so if a limb or a body part or whatever took a shot, or we were doing knife defense, or whatever, whether we had a knife and he had a knife or whatever, because Sandan's different than Nidon's, different than Shodan, different than whatever, right? If we took damage that would shut down a limb, then we were to immediately immobilize that limb that has been compromised and weren't allowed to use it. If we would have, the partner would have grabbed things, or we could have been blocking or uke in the gosh or whatever, took a shot to a wrist, or bicep got slashed or whatever, right? Punched right in a shoulder socket where this nerve would be compromised, right? There was no, let's keep training like we're invincible and we're the Terminator, right? We don't pretend that it's still usable like in some low budget B movie, right? We immediately removed it from the equation. We dropped it by our side, or for people who couldn't not still try to use the arm, we reached back and stuck it into our belt. So now it was trapped behind us. Okay. And so that was one, right? We just drop it. Okay. If it was a leg, well, then you hopped or you couldn't move. And now you couldn't kick with that leg or, nothing like that. Okay. So that was number one. Two, we had to strategically figure out how to reposition that limb, that side of the body, that particular area, to protect it from further harm or from being used against us. Right. So the point here is that this is strategy, right? Not just survival. It's strategy, right? When you train this way, you're not just enduring the injury, right? You're actively reducing future risk by controlling exposure. Okay. And again, adaptability, flexibility, all that kind of stuff, but control, right? This is about control. Okay. We're all control freaks. You can't tell me you're not. Okay. This is a perfect opportunity to be training that side of ourselves, but in a non-fantasy way. Right. And it's about taking control even when you're losing resources. That, my friends, is the ninja mindset. Okay. Tanamura Sensei from the Genbukan, Hatsumi Sensei's cousin, used to train. He even trained with Takamasa Sensei. Okay. There's a quote from him. And this is in the early manuals for new students. Okay. He says, if you cannot fight with one arm or one leg, then you do not yet know true ninpo. I mean, you could be holding your child or grandchild, got to reposition so they're behind you, kind of thing. Can't put them down, right? Trip over them, further hurt them, fall on them, he falls on them, whatever, right? But that's a limb taken out of the fight, right? You could be moving somebody in a protective kind of position, limbs outside the fight, okay? You got to control them, hold on to them sometimes so they can't just run away right into other danger, that kind of thing, right? But if you cannot fight with one arm or one leg, then you don't yet know true ninpo, okay? And this reinforces tactical adaptation. Okay? And this, I'll go to my grave, right, with this lesson. Okay. When those things happen, now my friend David, learned a lesson, right, the hard way. But we don't stop. Okay. But that doesn't mean we just bull rush in. And I'll talk about that here in a minute, right? This just assholes in tin cups and we just fight harder. No, we fight smarter, not harder, right? But we don't stop. We shift. We adapt. Right? And this goes back to that first book, which is really an anthology of articles that I'd written, right? Called Fight Smarter, Not Harder. Okay? This is what it means to fight smarter. Not to hit harder, not to ignore pain, but to adapt so fast and so strategically, right, that your opponent doesn't even realize that you're already injured. Right? I was taught that this is one of the reasons that the cat is associated with the ninja. And I know there's like lots of other reasons, but if you have a cat, I don't care if you like them, don't like them, whatever. If you understand how a cat operates, right? Very different from a dog, right? Dog does something, you yell, dog like looks at you like, oh shit, right? You yell at a cat might stop and look at you like, what? It's like a street thug, right? But if a dog jumped from the couch to a chair, knocked over a lamp and it broke, the dog would either run off or would look at you like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Cat does that. Cat lands. It could crash and burn, right? Hops up onto his feet and looks at you like, I meant that. I wanted to look exactly like that. Now, that little bastard could hobble off behind the couch to his kitty first aid station and, cry fucking meow, but he's not going to let you see it, right? And that was the point. One of the lessons I got very early on was never, ever, ever let them see you bleed. Never let them see your spirit break. Never let them see your concern or your worry or that you've been injured. Whatever, you just reposition. They shouldn't know whether their shot injured you or not. Yeah, but what if it's obvious? Well, then if it's fucking obvious, it's obvious. But if you have control over it, then okay. That's another thing that I really hate. People throwing out what if things when it's fucking obvious what the what if answer would be. Okay? So we would work these drills that had to do with the reality that if I take a shot or get shot or stabbed or cut or whatever a certain way, right? And of course, we're training, right, for safety and things like that. But if we take a shot that would take things out of the fight, then we're supposed to just drop the limb because it would be dead anyway. Now you've got to train with one less limb, one less wing. That's a huge game changer. Okay. Now, if you take a shot to the head, and that would get turned off, well, then by default, everything else gets turned off, right? But if we took a shot to the ribs or whatever, we were supposed to fold that and move with that in that position, because if the rib cage gets broken and the scaffolding collapses, then that's what you have. Right? That's what you have. Right? So just like if I'm in a situation and I step back into ichimonji, right? And the ground's unstable or it's uneven and I roll my ankle, so much so that the knee and the hip are not going to work so well because the body won't do anything to harm itself, right? What am I going to do? Wait, can we do this a different day? Today's not going to work so well, right? Everybody else in the dojo, are you okay? Oh, it's been my experience on the street that happens. The bad guy's like, thank you, G, and just goes to town. All right. So what if that happened? Right? Can we simulate that? Of course we can. Step back into ichimonji and then, suddenly shift all your weight to the lead leg, right? And you're now operating in a hicho, but not one where you can kick. And the hicho is reversed, right? People are often confused by a reverse or a gyaku hicho, where the lead leg is down and the rear leg is up. Yeah. So I'm either dealing with multiple attackers or I'm protecting a broken wing. And now I better be really, really good at either leaping from hicho to hicho for evasion or living the lessons in the Togakureryu Ninpo book, also known as the Book of Heaven, Earth, and Mankind, or the Teacher's Scroll, which is ideally with taijutsu the legs move first and then the torso and then the limbs. But in those instances where you can't move the legs, then you have to move the torso. So can we move on balance on one stable leg and shut this shit down really, really fast? Have we put the requisite amount of attention and effort into our proficiency with Kyusho, with weak points, and things like that, so that we can pick and choose our targets so that we shut this guy down? Because we can't last that long on one foot. Okay? And you could reactively try to use that broken foot, ankle, or whatever to kick him, but his shock sets in. And that's the other thing too, being injured during, right? The adrenals kick in to a certain extent and shock starts setting in. You don't have that much time. You need to get this shit over with very quickly, or you're going to black out and he's going to do whatever the hell he wants to you, with you, or whatever. And you could hope that all he wants is your wallet. Okay? So this is not negotiable. And if you make it negotiable, then you're choosing Fantasyland, or, well, it's still Fantasyland to assume that you're that fucking good and you're that fucking invincible that no matter who shows up, you're the shit. It's just, it doesn't, sorry. For me, it doesn't compute. It's one thing to defend yourself against some opportunistic asshat that, you hurt him even a little bit, or you make it a little bit tough and he runs off. And somebody that has spent a little bit of time cutting you from the herd, and this is not a fight. This is not one of those fights, right? Anyway, so again, I mentioned the fight smarter, not harder kind of thing. This is kind of a catch-all kind of thing that came out of training with Shidoshi Malmstrom, and that I've just kind of how I paraphrase Hatsumi Sensei stuff, right? Because he often talked about, in his early days, strength and power was tied to physical health, physical conditioning. He would train hours a day, that kind of stuff. And then he spent that 5 years where he thought he was going to die because he ended up with intestinal cancer. And he recovered, but it was a long recovery. And it was a huge wake-up call, because he realized that that kind of strength, that kind of power is transitory. It depends on him being in top condition. It depends on everything going well for him. And when age sets in, or illness sets in, or injury sets in, it just all goes away, which is why what most people's experience of Hatsumi Sensei has been on this, what most consider to be this softer side or whatever, right? It's true power based on timing, distancing, angling, those kind of things, strategic control, these principles and concepts that get better with age and do not rely on us being, 20 somethings with 12-pack abs. Okay? So the answer isn't to hit harder or to get tougher, right? The answer, when we're in situations like this, when we're losing resources and we've got to end this, right? It's to decide faster. We have to make decisions faster. Okay? That's why my big focus is on stress inoculation in the upper, intermediate, and the advanced levels. So your body and your brain don't freeze or flail. We just had an episode on that, right? But your body and your brain respond intelligently. Okay? So, and we've had these conversations. And this frames lessons that allow us to operate while avoiding freeze mode, while avoiding what I call the spray and pray panic, right? Flailing, overreacting, that kind of stuff, right? And it frames and allows for choosing techniques, tactics, those kind of things, right? From trained strategic responses, right? That we have worked, right? Not, I don't mean like pre-planned, like we believe we're going to execute the kata as is. I mean, like when I hit that patch of ice and went off a mountain cliff in my car, and for years had been visualizing, should I be in a situation like this, or like this, or like this, right? What to do, what to do, what to do. Can't exactly like train over and over again, taking your car off a cliff, right? So, but what it comes down to is that when you understand that under stress, you're already as fast and as strong as you can be. We've talked about this in the past, right? You don't need to train to be strong. You don't need to train to be fast. You will be as strong and as fast as you can be. What you can train to do is to maximize strength based on positioning and leverage. Because if you're up against somebody who's already bigger and stronger than you, well, then you can't be stronger than him, right? So leverage, how do I do things so that he's forced to operate in a weakened position naturally based on body mechanics and whatnot, while I'm operating the way a body's naturally strong, forcing him to operate the way a body's naturally weak or weaker. Speed is relative, right? What I want is reaction time. Okay. So what ends up happening is you realize that the real edge comes from clarity, not from chaos, right? Not from more force. And this is where a quote from Anaka Sensei comes in, right? You must train to move with freedom. That's a given. We've been hearing that for years, right? You must train to move with freedom even when the body is not free. And this leads somewhere else, okay? Because we're taught, right? Freedom of movement. But, okay, when it comes to this idea of fighting smarter, not harder, and that paradigm, and combined with stress inoculation drills, we can start to realize that it's about freedom of will, not just physical movement. Right? The ability to adapt and the will and intent to find that path based on clarity, to be able to control the mind, to be able to have emotional control, right? Better emotional regulation. Right? Freedom, right? Freedom of movement, that kind of stuff. Right? Most people believe that is a hard and fast on the physical body thing. It's not. It's also freedom of thinking, right? Freedom of the mental freedom, right? Where your thoughts are not inhibited by stress or worry or whatever. Okay. James, was it, I don't know if you saw it on Facebook or not, but I shared a meme. Was it today or yesterday? What the hell was it? Praying. It was about worry. It was about praying for relief from your worrying is like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Worry is like praying really hard for exactly what you don't want.
There you go. That's it. Yeah. What was my little comment? Do you remember what comment I added to that?
And like being an accomplice to one's own ass kicking.
There you go. That was a Shidoshi Malmstrom thing too. Never, ever, ever, ever be an accomplice to your ass kicking. And he would also say your job is not to win or lose this fight, right? Your job is to make him be an accomplice to his own ass kicking. That's strategy, right? That's not technique. I'm not saying techniques aren't important, right? But anyway, so again, for Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday this week, 3 p.m. Eastern, right? Get us back on track. If this topic matters to you, right? If you know that real life doesn't follow dojo rules, if you know this, right? Then you need to see what I'll be unpacking on this Wednesday, right? Different training ideas and things like that within that realm, right? And I'm going to focus on the 3 injury potentials or possibilities, right? Being injured before, or like that's how you, like the first shot that he lands blindsided kind of thing, and you're injured, and now you got to work, right? Being injured in some way during the defensive action, and being injured at the end after that particular foray is over. Okay? And then some ideas for how to set that up. Okay. So again, let's wrap this up by taking a look, or just kind of with a reminder that this is about clarity, right? Techniques are important, right? I know I just said it's not all about techniques, but techniques are important. But tactics win the day. And adaptive capacity, right, is the number one thing real warriors train for. Okay. So I don't know about you, but for me, the way I train and the way I train my students, right? I don't train for perfection. I train to survive imperfection. Right? So this is the KUDEN side of things, right? And if I want you to, if you take nothing else away from this lesson, okay? This lesson is simple. Prepare for the fight no one else sees coming. It's the big thing that Hatsumi Sensei has always pointed out, right? The true warrior prepares for the fight that no one else sees coming. And those aspects of the fight that no one else considers. Right? No guarantee that you're going to make it through any given attack. But the goal is to give ourselves as many advantages as possible. And the last thing we want to do is cripple ourselves before anything ever happens. Okay? Mindset, preparation, those kind of things. All right. So that being said, James, you know what time it is. Questions, comments, complaints, since he's got broad shoulders and a nice shirt today. My wife bought me this. Actually, for the last vacation. It's very comfortable.
Dave said Shinken is always valuable. It needs constant reinforcement.
Yeah, tip of the boot love is what Shidoshi Malmstrom used to call it. You want granny love? No matter how bad things get, she's going to give you some milk and cookies and tell you everything's going to be okay. Or tip of the boot love, which is typically dad's love. Bring that F home. You don't want to take it to dad, so you take it to grandma. She gives you a little talk, some milk and cookies. It'll be okay. You tell me if your dad says something wrong to you. I'll tell him. Because if you take that F home and you show it to dad, whatever size boots he's wearing, well, maybe not in today's world. Sorry. Dads want to be their kids' friends instead of being friendly. Become friends when the kid understands the same things, right? Anyway, and I know that's going to piss people off too. Anyway, anything else?
Chris has a question. I have a question. When fighting with an injured limb, are we waiting for the attacker's errors in timing and distance, or forcing him to attack our stronger side so we can defend him off easier?
There you go, wanting to rush things. The answer to that, Chris, is it depends, which I know you're going to hate. However, how close are you to blacking out from your sugar drop? How fast are you bleeding out? Okay? If you've got time, use the time. And besides that, if you delay it and you're really the defender, that gives time for cops to be called and show up, other people to step in, whatever, right? This is not a hard, fast kind of thing. But if I'm going to end up in a situation or in a position where I'm going to be on the ground and that cone is getting smaller, right? Fuzzier, whatnot. Or it's just going to be all over really, really fast. And I can't protect myself. I can't think about being injured in a way where you got to get a tourniquet on, or you got to get a bandage on, or you got to stop bleeding, or whatever, right? You got to immobilize yourself to try to neutralize the shock, kind of thing, right? It depends on what's going on. To get a one answer fits all. Ego loves those kind of things, right? Because it's a default that we can just go to. But the thing here is, and part of the clarity is, what's going on, right? What kind of time do I have, right? What's the severity of the threat? If this guy's really, really good, then I would think that it's in my best interest to let him take the shot so that I can exploit things, right? As far as waiting till he makes a mistake, see, I just generated a mistake. But his mistake would be attacking me when I look like I can't do anything. But if you don't train to be able to do things from positions where it doesn't look like you can do anything, then you can't do anything, right? We did a seminar. I brought Shidoshi Malmstrom in one time, and we laughed our asses off about this thing, about the topic. We had more people at that seminar, and they had a little bit of a letdown within the first 5 minutes, but it was framed well that we had to pop a fantasy bubble, right? But the theme of a seminar, and I brought him in for it, the theme of the seminar was defending in impossible situations. Okay. We had a good laugh with that one. Okay. Because within the first 30 seconds, he said, okay, so I know what the theme is, right? Defending in impossible situations. Okay. And we can see how popular this topic is. But impossible situations are impossible by their very nature. So we won't be doing that. And people are looking around like, wait a minute, did I just get duped into coming to this thing? And he goes, now, what we will be doing this weekend is defending in situations that most people, including fighters and self-defense people, assume to be impossible. And that saved the day. But we let off with clarity. So the question is, are you looking to defend against or survive impossible situations? Or are you training to maximize your ability to operate in situations that most would consider impossible? Like, you can't move around in your combine, right? You are limited in space, or you are injured, or now you can only use one arm. Okay, shit, pull a Black Knight halfway, both arms got injured, right? And now you can't use either one of them. You're stuck with torso, shoulders, headbutts, right? Maybe some knees or kicks or whatever, right? Because you get injured, right? Okay. One arm was injured before you got there, and then he smacked your good arm. Okay. But you got to come up with these things, right? So the answer is, it depends. It depends on what kind of time do you have, right? What kind of options do you have? What I don't recommend is just doing what they do that in movies, because what they do in movies sells tickets. Can you imagine a Steven Seagal movie where he defended against the top bad guy with the same ease as he took care of all the lower minions throughout the movie, right? Like the main battle scene was over in like 10 seconds. People want their freaking money back. They'd be uber disappointed. He had a movie like that. What was the movie with the freight train that went off the freaking thing at the end? I it was a sequel. Shit, Under Siege. Under Siege.
Too.
Yeah, that was number 2, right? With the train. Yeah, he took care of the top guy. I mean, it took a little bit longer, right? I mean, I don't know, 2 minutes, whatever, right? But the 20-minute extravaganza at the end was the fucking train is exploding and going off a bridge, and they're trying to get off the train at the same time, right? That's the cliffhanger. That's the big thing at the end. That's what sells tickets. We got to be careful that we don't fall for this bullshit about how this stuff works, where, oh, it was a good fight. Fuck good fights. Excuse my language, YouTube. Right? Good fights are for sporting events, because people are most disappointed when the knockout happens in the first round, the first, couple of minutes, seconds, whatever. Oh, fuck. Well, that was a waste of money. Because people came to watch a long, drawn out, two muscle heads just banging the shit out of each other. And I don't mean in a good way. So, but in a survival situation, the longer it takes, the more depleted your energy stores and the faster you start losing. So I can't give you a definitive answer other than the answer I gave you. Okay. So what do you have left? What's in the tank? Because you're, when I say that you're losing things, in Chris's case, right? I'll borrow you, Chris. His sugar spikes and his sugar drops like significantly, right? And so he may not lose a limb. He may not have his arms damaged, legs damaged, but the sugar is dropping fast, right? Or you held your breath because you didn't practice breathing training under stress, and so you're hyperventilating, and now the carbon dioxide is overwhelming the oxygen nitrogen intake, and you're getting tingly, and things are getting heavy, and your vision is starting to go, and you're getting lightheaded, and fuck. Okay, there's a reason for all of these skills. They're non-negotiable. Nothing in this fucking curriculum is I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it's not there for fluff. It's not there because we want to be cool ninja like in the movies. It's all there because shit happens the way it happens, right? I mean, just take your ukemi. We teach you rolling from the ground first, not just because most people coming in haven't done anything gymnastically or whatever since school, if then, right? But you could find yourself on the ground, and now the attack is still coming, right? Not just because you're at a picnic or whatever. You got knocked down and shit, right? Here he comes, kick you in the face or the ribs or whatever, and you got to get your body out of there, or you got to roll with the kick, right? And then, right, we teach the next level of rolling where you're standing or walking or moving or whatever, right? Because you could be thrown, okay? And then we got leaping, and then we've got body drops and break falls and things like that. Okay, well, but there is a connection. The connection is, what's the attack look like? Okay, so if I'm being thrown, there's lateral momentum, and so rolls are going to be my friend, right? But if he does something to me to lock me up so I can't roll, I'm going to have to pick my feet up and move to a new position very, very quickly, because any attempt to try to roll, I'm going to break myself. And then for body drops and break falls and things like that, right? There's no lateral movement. My legs are being knocked out from under me, or I'm being yanked straight to the ground, and I have to receive the ground and neutralize things that way. So while it looks like people are just learning skills that they can pick and choose from, because we hear that all the time, don't we, James? Right? I don't like rolling. I don't give a shit. Okay? Do you like your nose ending up in your fucking underwear because you did a 1-point landing without the gear? Because somebody threw you, or your head skull cracking into the ground, or your head popping back and breaking your neck. Is that preferable? Right? But the connection to them, after we can get ego past skill collecting, is scenario based. What's being taken away and how? right? What's the condition? Right? So we can learn that. Then as students, we put things into context and understand that we're preparing for specific scenarios. As teachers, we have other ways to explain the techniques and the skills to one, help students over uh, like challenging mindsets and trepidation and insecurity and whatnot, but also to reframe resistance. Do I really have to learn that? Yeah. Well, somebody sweeps a leg out from under you, right? That some of the shit you're learning how to do. What if somebody does that to you? Right? You're going to be like these taekwondo or whatever tic-tac-toe teachers and stuff. Like you just have to be fast enough that doesn't happen. You just have to be good enough so that doesn't happen. James, you ever hear that in your prior training? I know I did. Right? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all wonderful. That now assumes that I'm better than him. What if that's not the reality? Okay. So that other fallacy with the sport fighters or even street fighters, right? Nobody's going to do that cheat and chink shit, right? It's going to be a fair fight. In a real attack survival situation, it's already not a fair fight. You didn't agree to be there, right? He didn't warn you before he threw the first shot or whatever. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of things that these things are non-negotiable. That doesn't mean that you can't pick and choose, right? You can pick and choose to your heart's delight. You just have to recognize that when you do that, you are assuming, hoping, or guessing that the attack that comes will not demand that you know any of these things or be good at any of these things, that you've moved off the table. And that's what it is. So let's wrap this up. James, last minute questions, comments, anything from anybody?
Maui said, "You have the most clever way of thinking. KUDEN is full of aha moments."
Oh, well, I'm not trying to be clever. I am trying to curb my direct honesty, because these things would sound very, very different. James knows. There's been times I've been irritated in class with advanced level students, and usually they know when like it's okay, right? Because like, oh, you guys are killing me. All right, so let's get back at this, right? And there's other days that I use that exact same phrase, and I just want to pound somebody into the ground because you're just, oh, you guys are fucking killing me here. Just like teaching. This is the lesson. This is the thing. And see, I don't get irritated like that because somebody's not getting the moves or they're having a coordination problem or whatever, right? I get that way when they're playing fucking games and they're accepting shit or mistakes as though, well, like, at least it worked. Okay. Hatsumi Sensei said, if you do something, even if it's not pretty, it's still good taijutsu. Okay. How about if we stop looking for crutches to make up for shit? Okay. Because without knowing the full context of that lesson that quote was pulled from, to use it as an excuse for shit is the height of laziness. because there was another thing that I posted. You know, those things that Facebook pops up like memories and stuff. Like 5 years ago, you posted this picture, and then what would you post today? I think the one that popped up was a quote from like a John Wayne movie that man needs two things. He needs a code of ethics and he needs a backbone to stand up and to stay within that code of ethics, right? And then what I posted was one of those little light up signs with the letters that you can put in to write things out, right? James, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're not doing your own damn research. You're searching Google till you find some other wingnut that is telling you what you want to hear or something like that, right? Yeah, that's not. I'm doing my own research. No, you're not. You're just going to keep looking, searching till you find some asshat who's going to tell you what you want to hear. That's not research. Right? If you were doing research, you would look at the pros and cons and both sides and see what's actually out there and not that. Oh, this guy. Yeah. By all means, do your own research. Anyway, what else? Anything else for anybody? Oh, by the way, you guys that are having aha moments and stuff, whatever platform you're on, post those things in there, right? One, it helps the algorithm, because you're engaging. But two, it lets other people know things. Three, it gets your thoughts out in this thing, and it actually validates for you that you learned something. I understand, right? I learned a lot, right? Too much to actually. What do I tell students when I ask them at the end of class? At the end of every class, every student has to tell me, what'd you learn today? Okay. And oh man, so much. Okay. What are you going to remember when you walk out the door? You've gone to the changing room, you had bullshit conversations at the end of class, you've changed your clothes, and you walked out that door. What's still going to stick with you? And then something comes out. Okay. And the last thing is that I take those, right, and it turns into other topics. It turns into other things. It lets me know like what somebody's learning from, and then if I don't have something else in place, I can keep work. Right? It lets me know what things are landing and what's not, and whatever. So I mean, help yourself, help others, help me. If nothing else, just be greedy, right? Help yourself. I know mom and grandma told you not to do that, not to be greedy. Okay. Shidoshi Malmstrom also told us to be greedy, right? Because you got to get this stuff. Okay. And you can't help anybody else until you get it. So get it quickly. As a matter of fact, I almost called my dojo a long time ago. Most people know that my dojo's gone through a couple of different names. Bujinkan Kuryu Dojo, Kuryu, Dragon of Potential, but it also can be translated as 9 lineages, and Mori no Tora Dojo, so Forest Tiger Dojo, and astrological kind of things, and where I live and whatnot, right? But it was almost called Yokobari no Dojo. Yokobari in Japanese means greedy for life, because I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to have an experience in so many experiences that when I finally closed my eyes for the last time, like, it's been a hell of a ride kind of thing, right? And a friend, native Japanese speaker and whatnot, you ought to call your dojo Yokobari no Dojo or Yokobari Dojo. Greedy for life. Okay. I know it runs contrary to what most people think. And we're not being greedy as in depriving other people. We're being greedy as in getting as many lessons and getting as much of this stuff as possible in the shortest amount of time possible, because the better we make ourselves, by default, we become better at every aspect. So by being the best Jeff I can be, simultaneously, I become the best teacher, the best student, the best father, the best husband, best friend that I can possibly be. Be careful with some of these lessons we got early on. There was a reason the child is given the lesson they're given, but that was a childhood lesson. Don't forget that with true enlightenment, the opposite is also true. Ooh, there's some deep shit. Everybody wearing a high top Dobby? It's true. Okay. People argue over the barrel being half full or half empty. I could make an argument that it's always full. Just because a half or a third or whatever is water and the rest of it's air doesn't make it not. However, if it's half empty, then it's also half full. So the argument is bullshit. With true enlightenment, the opposite is the opposite is also true. Okay. All right. What else, James? Anything else?
Just Trinity said really late, but hello.
Hey. That's it. That's all I got. All right. Cool beans. All right. If you're a local student, guess what? We're going to be at the new dojo tomorrow. I think the earliest people are getting there is 2:30 because we have just a few like drywall things to do. And then other people are getting there at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Same thing on Wednesday, but we have to start moving to like lower areas then and whatnot. Right? Get things and get things cleaned and wiped down and all that kind of stuff. Salvage as much stuff as possible so we can get filing cabinets and stuff back in place to start opening things up to getting students back in classes and new students in the dojo. So onward and upward. All right. Anything else? Last call. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Chris just put half empty, half full. I'm just glad to have something in my glass.
All right. Just make sure you're not going to have the last words of Socrates. I drank what? Actually, he did it on purpose. No, it's a big joke and all that, but there was fortitude. There was a man who believed in what he believed in, right? He did not have to commit suicide. He was ordered to kill himself. Didn't have to do that. If he would just, because he was charged with the crime of subverting and what do you call that? Turning the youth against the government, the powers that be, and shit like that, right? With this philosophy and truth and being able to see clearly and whatnot. And all he had to do was renounce that and just stop it, right? He drank the hemlock. Okay. I don't think we have that many people like that. I don't know if they ever did over history, but anyway, what was that one quote? And I still didn't look up the warrior's name, right? The student's job is to become a warrior in a time when warriors no longer exist. Thomas Merton, who was a monk, discussed this when he said that matters of the spirit require an inordinate amount of strength to resist the pull and allure of a society who doesn't care nor do anything to nurture the spirit. We have to be willing to do what most won't. And that is not just in our lives and in society, but also when it comes to other people who use the word warrior or that are doing martial arts and whatnot, other fighters. We have to be. Okay, that doesn't mean you train all the time and whatever, right? This is human beings are at the top of the food chain, not because we're bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. We're obviously not. We're easily killed. We're easily eaten, whatever. It's because of this thing and the will, right? Heart and the head, not because of physical prowess or whatever. It's the mental, right? It's the hunter gets the prey, not just because he spent $3,200 on shooting gear, right? It's the ability to track. It's the ability to, yeah. Okay, same thing. You want to outsmart the bad guy? Okay. be able to go to places and do things that he not only doesn't think is possible, but he doesn't think it's possible to such a degree that he would never even think about it. Okay. And beware of fat old bald guys who have survived really bad shit. Because all people see is this thing, this image right here. Okay. What they can't see is what's inside here and what's inside here. And that's what makes me smile. But if you think, act, and operate like everybody else, you're not going to get different results. It's always going to be a contest. It's not a contest. Okay? An attack is a puzzle that you have to solve on the fly. Okay? With or without all your pieces. All right, James, that's all I got. Anything else?
Trinity just threw in a thing I saw for parents. Never allow yourself to feel shame for raising dragon slayers in an era where dragons don't exist.
I don't. And even when they didn't want to come to class and all that, and then later ended up using their skills because they can't foresee the future. And this is not just about parents and kids. Okay. I think people have seen a quote that I put out at some point that I would never, ever fold or feel bad or take the insult seriously from somebody who I would never ask advice from. Right? So be careful. Okay. Dragons come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Just make sure they're not yours that you're battling. Or if they are, get rid of them first. Because you're not going to be able to deal with anybody else's until you do. Best compliment I got since the fire. It's one of my guys. I talk about him often. Tim Wolf, big guy. He just said that my ability to stay calm and focused and moving forward and not just fold up in some corner or whatever. Just most people wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And it's not like I'm holding like tears and whatever at bay or whatever. You either live the lessons and you assimilate them into yourself, or what's the other option? Faking it. As soon as shit like that happens, just like with this other guy, as soon as shit happens, you go from talking a good game to just being this depressed lump that the world attacked me. Yeah, does it all the time. Huh? Resilience, flexibility, adaptability. Can't do anything about that, but there's a shit ton of things I can do things about. What's my priorities? Let's go. All right. That's it. I'm not even going to ask anymore. Thank you, James. I appreciate it. Okay, James is a busy guy, so when he shows up and helps with these things, I really appreciate it. And then my other guy, Terrence. Terrence is my new guy doing social media. So if you start to see clips and whatnot from KUDENs and Whiteboard Wednesdays and memes and stuff like that going up, that's all him, right? Terrence Hall. So he's my other guy in the background getting this stuff out and whatnot because I couldn't do most of this stuff. Right. So anyway, James, thank you again. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who's both a regular and if you showed up for the first time, hopefully you'll be back. And if not, no harm, no foul. But either way, I'm going to be back again. James will be back again. Trinity, Dave, all these guys will be back again, right? So hopefully, I'll see you on our next episode of KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.